I'm Wayne Tuttle, and this is Chasing Legends. Welcome back to Chasing Legends. I'm Wayne Tuttle, your host once again. Please hit subscribe, hit the notification bell, leave comments, go to the website www.legendssuperstitionmountains.com. Let's get to today's story. Now this story is kind of interesting because I was contacted by a gentleman. I'm going to say his name, Skip Fromback. He had contacted me and we were talking a bit about the Peralta Stone maps and a couple other things. And then he told me about a story he was familiar with. It was concerning a woman. He said, are you related to a woman named Elizabeth Tuttle? And he talked about it, and it was called the Two Saddles Cache. And I was kind of not, it wasn't ringing any bells. It sounded like an interesting story, and I thought, well, I have 6 filing cabinets full of treasure stories, so I'll look up in Washington to see if I can find this treasure story. So I started going through the files and I'm not coming up with anything so then I just pulled every file I had in Washington, which was a good sized portion of treasure stories, and started one by one reading through them. Obviously the key name in there would be Elizabeth Tuttle. So I'm going through and then I run into one and it was labeled John Welch's Cache. So Elizabeth Tuttle was his daughter, so that was the tie-in. So then I responded to him. And then I went through. I had several magazine articles that had been written, some editorial and letters to newspapers and stuff concerning the history. And then, of course, I went in and kind of dove in a little to make sure, well, John Welch, okay, he's real. Elizabeth Tuttle, Anna Elizabeth Welch was real. And so I went through the particulars and thought, you know what? This is kind of an interesting story. And I don't know if we've touched on Washington yet. So it begins in 1876, and it's out of Portland, Oregon. John Welch, who's actually a prominent and well-known dentist, also works as a guide. And he is a paid guide for a group that's going up into Western Canada prospecting. They go and they're up there. They do very, very well. They end up with what's considered around $85,000 at the time worth of ore. They load up all the animals. Starting to return, they start hitting bad weather. On the weather they're hitting, they get up to about the area, Babac Ridge, and it's a few miles from a place called Trinidad. And what happens is there's an Indian attack. And the Indians kind of like hit the party very, very hard. It's a very prolonged battle. And when it's over, everybody's still standing, but it's like, wow, how can we sustain that? We can't move very fast because of these pack animals and so forth. So the group of men sit around and they talk, and then they just decide what we'll do is one of us has to take this stuff up and bury it and find a way so we can come back later and retrieve this stuff when there's better weather and we have better protection security to do so. John Welch is picked as the individual that will go hide this stuff. So he rides out and he's looking in this canyon and he sees there's this U-shaped section and he realizes that's a good spot to use as identifying marker. And across from it, directly across, there's a ridge about 25 feet up from the floor. And he sees this like alcove and he says, that's perfect because this is very recognizable. When I stand here, I can find that. When I find that. So he goes up to that alcove area. He takes 2 saddles off the horses and he buries them. He buries them with a number of other items and things and puts some blankets over them and then puts dirt over it. And you can't even, he said, you couldn't tell he was there. So then he did a bunch of paces off and directional paces that he wrote down. And he got his spot, and then he buried all the ore. And he figured, okay, so I know where it's at. I got 2 markers. Once I hit the second marker, then it's just follow the map, and I'm good. So I went back, told all the men. Everybody thought it was a good plan. They told him keep the map and stuff. and then they would get together. So they go in, they get into town, and once they get back into Portland, the military, because of the problems with the Indians and a number of other things, would not go out with them. And they continued to get delay. It had to be everybody got together, and they go, and we know how those things work, right? Everybody's got to show up at this place at this time, and then we got to have these guys that'll allow us to take some soldiers and go back. The military did not want to escort them, and they felt they needed an escort to do this. So years and years go by, and quite a few years go by. And in 1903, there's a gentleman who buys a hotel. And 1906, after he's operated the hotel, I'm trying to look down to see if I can see his name, Willard Sykes. So Willard Sykes purchases a hotel. After a few years, gentleman comes in, signs in the registry as John Welch. John Welch says he wants to go out. He was part of a party that was attacked by Indians. He wants to go out to the area where the attack happened, see if there was some trinkets and stuff, mementos. He wants to do that. That's his story. Sykes says his son's very familiar with the area, so his son can go out with him on these trips. So they go out and they spend 3 weeks out in the area. The son reports to his dad of like, he didn't know what Welch was looking for, but he said he would be all over the place, one direction, another, this direction, that direction. And he would dig, and then he would stop, and then they would camp, and then he would the next day start again and dig and stop. Now, Welch the entire time is looking for the saddles, because once he has the saddles, then everything else falls into place. He has no success. In fact, Welch is never seen again in town or anywhere in the area after that date. Now, around many years later, Welch is married, he has children, and he has a daughter named Anna Elizabeth. She likes to go by Elizabeth. She does not like the name Anna. She marries a man named Tuttle. And no relation to me, but she is told the story by her father, gives her the map, and tells her the directions and everything of how to find the saddles, and then this. And he says, I spent all this time, and I cannot do this. At the time, it's a little controversial because she has a husband. She does have children, but she does make 5 trips into the area. Each time they make a trip, she walks around. She constantly tells everyone, if you get me to the saddles, if we can unbury these saddles, I have the map and the directions, and I will be able to walk you directly to where all the ore is buried. So they spend a significant amount of time, and they cannot find them. They get very, very frustrated. 5 trips, she's away from her family. Finally, she's told by her husband and her family, that's enough. You're nothing. It's said, well, we'll get to that later, but one of the individuals on this trip with her is a man named Ben Wembley. Ben Wembley is a guide and a trapper, and he works in the area. And he thinks she's full of caca. She doesn't know what she's talking about. Her dad spun a yarn. They went up and down. They dug holes everywhere. He says, it sounds like a great story, but it's just not true. And Wembley said he was paid well to do the job by her, and he worked with her on it most of the trips. And he said, but he kind of forgot about it after a while because he didn't believe in it. So many, many years later, Wembley is out trapping. He's an older man and so forth, and he's trapping, and he has a coyote that got hung up on a trap and was trying to do it, and it had drugged the trap. And it had uncovered something, and he saw part of a blanket or something, some piece of cloth. So he went over, pulled this cloth, and lo and behold, he started pulling it up and finding 2 saddles buried there. There also was a comb and some other personal items, a pair of girls' shoes, but the 2 saddles, the blankets, everything was in place, and Wembley suddenly realized, oh my God, Elizabeth Tuttle was telling the truth. This is the exact spot. I've uncovered it. Oh my gosh, I've found this. So then Wembley goes to the hotel keeper and tries to look him up, and he has no idea and nothing. So they all know it's Elizabeth Tuttle, so he goes and searches for her. He goes to all the people he knew, but she'd moved sometime shortly before he got there. So Wembley's kind of realizing, man, he remembers this woman telling him If you take me to the saddles, I have the map and the directions, and I can walk you directly, the paces and everything, right to where the ore is buried on the flat. So he's like, my gosh, okay, so we're so close, because this is close. Webley also states the fact that Elizabeth Tuttle was actually only within 10 to 20 feet at one time when she was digging of the saddles. He said, we were very close at one time, and we just missed unburying them at that time, one of the trips with her. So Webley goes about and spends a considerable amount of time, and then finally starts going down to historical societies and different people and trying to talk, and then he finds out that Elizabeth Tuttle is dead. She had passed away, I believe, in 1929. So he realizes the whole search, everything's done, it's over. He has no chance. And they continue to write about it. People still search for this treasure. They know the site where the saddles were found. There's treasure markings all over the place, probably from treasure hunters that have come after the fact. Welch doesn't seem to have mentioned a bunch of markers. His basic thing was he buried the saddles, and then he had the map. No one knows what happened to the map, whether Elizabeth Tuttle passed it on, it got lost in the shuffle. If the family had, nobody has a clue what happened to the map and direction, so we don't have that. But there's nothing ever mentioned in the primary story or what the story that Elizabeth Tuttle's told, though we don't know what exactly was conferred upon to her from John Welch. So that's the John Welch Cache story, or treasure story if you want it. It's still out there, as far as I know. As Skip said, you know, they're still searching. I think it was his uncle or his dad or someone had searched for it, and he still had an interest in it. I found it interesting, not even just because of the connection of Elizabeth Tuttle and whoever her husband was and all that. I found it just as an interesting connection. It sounds familiar like other stories, but they did find the second marker. And I can understand the frustration of saying, this isn't really a true treasure story. Oh, wow, we did prove it. Because I had similar thing with, did Bob Ward really bury jars of coins? Did Henry Burns bury some stuff out by Burns Ranch and all? And then I ran into stuff and realized there's actually some truth to it. And it causes you suddenly to realize, wow, it's just so elusive, because if we would have found that or known where that was located from or where it came from, but we were just kind of left and lost. A number of people have been out there. No one's found any evidence of anything else ever since. It just shows you time and this and that can just erase everything and just leave you literally just hanging there of like, I know there's something here. I just don't even know where to look anymore. So there's the John Welch story, or the Elizabeth Welch story, or the Two Saddles Cache story, or whatever you want to label it. But there it is. I hope everybody enjoyed that. I enjoyed it. I enjoyed the research and looking up the history and all that. The Dutch Hunter Rendezvous is now scheduled and slated for Friday, Saturday, Sunday, November 14th, 15th, and 16th. Yes, that's the official word. We're going to kick it off. So it's going to be in a cooler part of November, in mid-November, so we should have really nice weather. We'll have the availability of the Don's Camp. Everything's been reserved and set for us here moving forward. So we'll try to 21 years going on, so we'll try to make it a good deal. We'll try to find ourselves some really excellent guest speakers from all over the place of different types of topics and things. So I hope you can join us there and can make your plans early, because it's just still spring. Hope everybody had a happy Easter, has a great week, is having a wonderful spring, and enjoys the rest of the week as we get ready to go in. Please join us on Friday on Lives. We've been having a good run of good questions and stuff as well on that. So until the next time we meet again, always remember, I'm Wayne Tuttle. You're not. And this was Chasing Legends.